Hi, everyone. My name's Casey Kostick. I'm the Ward 3 City Council member in Takoma Park. I'm speaking into this and was waiting a minute here because we're videotaping this so that we can put it online afterwards, and residents who aren't able to be here will have a chance to watch the conversation. First of all, I want to welcome all of you here tonight, and on behalf of Mayor Stewart, who is here from City of Takoma Park, and our staff members, Daryl and Ian, I want to welcome all of you and welcome Pepco and CW & Sons. I think it's really great that we have the opportunity to learn a little more about this project that has been impacting all of your lives significantly over the past months. And to have an opportunity to ask questions and discuss some of the things you've been experiencing as residents. So I will turn it over to Pepco now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Council Member. On behalf of Pepco, my name is Tammy Watkins, External Affairs Manager with Pepco. I really want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. I'd like to thank the Council Member and the Mayor and staff for hosting us. We really appreciate these opportunities to come out and talk about our projects, to educate residents that are living in the neighborhood and address your questions and concerns. This evening, I also have my colleague, Mr. Travors Culpepper, here this evening. He is with the DC side of External Affairs, because we understand there are some of our residents here on Eastern Avenue on the DC side who also have some questions and concerns, and we sincerely hope we'll get those addressed tonight. Also this evening, I have Pepco engineers Sarah Lacey and Mr. Charles Schulper, who are here to address more of the technical questions. I wish I could answer every question. I wish I could even tell you what this is, but I'm going to leave that to our experts tonight. And tonight's presentation will be done by Mr. Rich Ellison with CW & Sons, and we will be doing a deep dive into the construction and the project, hopefully give you a lot of really good information. There will be questions and answers when we're done, and if after tonight's presentation you find that you still have questions or concerns, I would encourage you to take one of our handy dandy cards here at the door. On the card, it says notice of upcoming utility work, but I want to point out this is actually utility work that's taking place, but we're being green tonight. And for those of you that do not recall, when we actually sent these in a mailer about a year ago to notify residents about this work, but we're using them tonight because their purpose on the back is it's all of the same information about the project, including the 800 contact line and the email line. So if after tonight there's still questions or concerns that people have, we just want to make sure you have a way to reach out to us. We'll just start right into it. So in an overview of the project, for those of you that already know, the purpose of this is about enhancing reliability for our customers, and a lot of that reliability begins at our substations. As part of our commitment, this is an upgrade of the high voltage infrastructure to meet the growing demand in the Takoma Park, Silver Spring area. The project that we're dealing with here goes from our Takoma substation, which is actually over in Prince George's County, to the Sligo substation, which is downtown Silver Spring. For those of you that aren't also aware, we are also beginning work in the area between our Sligo substation to our Linden substation. So it's a similar project, just further north along Georgia Avenue. For those of you that are already seeing it, it requires construction along roads that affect residents in Takoma Park, Silver Spring, all in the area along this transmission line. There's a map just to give you a general sense, and I understand for the residents in the room tonight, we're going to focus on the areas along Eastern Avenue closest towards the Takoma substation. But just to give everybody just this general information, and then also the map is on the handout as well. And I will now be stepping aside and handing over the presentation to our expert, because as much as I would love to tell you about the underground transmission construction process, a little bit out of my bailiwick. So I'll hand it over to Mr. Rich Ellison with CW & Sons.
Good evening. A lot of the questions that come up when we're talking to people in the community is, why is it taking so long? And part of what I would like to show you is a little bit of a step-by-step process of what we go through to put this in so that you can better understand why this is a slower process than perhaps the average project you see out here with someone just digging a hole and putting a pipe in the ground. This is the assembly that we're putting in the ground. There's 14 pipes in that assembly. That's just one of the 2 lines that has to go into each street. Now the process starts out, of course, the engineers come out, they actually lay out stakes like this through the neighborhood to show us exactly where to put the lines. As soon as these stakes go in, then the next thing happens is a little truck comes along and you see the guy out there with the spray paint can, and he looks like your grandchildren with the sidewalk chalk all over your sidewalks and all over the street area. This is to tell us where the underground utilities are. We need to know that before we dig. As soon as we finish that, one of the noisiest processes that comes along is we have to saw cut. Now when we saw cut, we cut about 12 inches deep so that we get through the concrete substructure. A lot of the reason for that going so deep is that any kind of noise or vibration that we're doing in the ground does not transmit to buildings or adjoining surfaces around it. When the saw cutting is through, there usually isn't any construction for a couple of days. All you'll do is see the street with the lines in it as you see right here. Then shortly after that, the crew will show up and they'll start breaking out the asphalt. Now the asphalt is the surface on top of the concrete that we just mentioned. You notice here in the arrow is pointing to the 8 to 10 inches of concrete that is below the asphalt. This is actually the surface that actually takes the majority of the weight. But cutting through that protects adjoining houses and adjoining business structures so that this vibration doesn't damage their property. Then comes the dirt. Now, as we take and remove the dirt to put these in, these things go anywhere from 8.5, 9 feet deep to sometimes 20 feet deep. As we're putting the pipes in, we're trying to get them under the other utilities as low as possible to protect them from other contractors digging in the road, also to get them as low as possible out of the way of future construction, also to get the more ground around them to absorb the heat from the units themselves. All of the dirt that comes out of the ground is removed to a landfill. Nothing that comes out goes back in. I'll mention this truck again. This is one of our trucks. You'll see these trucks all over the road. Some of them will have our markings on them. Some will have other contractors' marks on them. But notice the size of the truck because it's relative to something I'm going to show you in a moment. As we dig the dirt down, you'll see the bracing starting to go in up here on the top. This, of course, is to protect the people working in the trenches. These trenches have to be shored for protection. You constantly hear on the news about cave-ins. This is a very dangerous operation. So we're either putting in, these are what they call pump jacks, where they're actually pumping against steel plates on the sides, or they actually have trench boxes that they put down in, which are pre-assembled steel boxes. Once we get them down inside, then the men can be down in the holes working. Next comes actually installing the pipe itself. Now it takes a crew of 5 men to put in a single piece of pipe. There has to be men above the ground holding it. As you'll see here, on the face of this, you see the black here, those are spacers. Those spacers have to go every 5 feet. So this pipe has to be put in such a way that you're putting it through these spacers so it's always aligned. Because realize we're running pipe 3.5 miles from one end to the other. So it's very important that A comes out on A on the other end. Once this pipe is in and installed, then we pour 2 inches of concrete on all surfaces and between the pipe itself. That's the red concrete that you see right here in the hole. Now that's done so that if someone's digging at a later time, they're going to be able to recognize that this assembly is electrical. So it tells them to stop digging. Next we start backfilling. Now when we backfill, we backfill with recycled concrete, or what they call RC6. All the concrete and all the asphalt that we take out goes out to recycling areas, is recycled, so everything we're putting back in the ground is recycled product. As we go along, you see the arrow here pointing down to this thing right here. What that is a piece of like aluminum foil tape. Again, this is put about 3 feet below the surface, so if someone's digging, it's another indication they've got something down there that they need to be avoiding. Next, we'll come along and we'll temporarily put asphalt paving into the area. This is to return it to the road surface so you can drive on it, so it can be a normal road surface. It's going to be a little rougher than a finished surface, but it's a surface there to be a temporary to protect the traffic. They do roll it out. They try to make it smooth, but over a little bit of time, this stuff gets a little bumpy, and especially if you've driven over on Eastern Avenue, all of you know it's very bumpy. Once we finish a section between manholes, then the project is planned to come back and go through, replace that concrete underneath the asphalt, and do a full surface paving curb to curb on your streets. So when you finish, you're going to finish with a finished road. The other thing that we have to put in, because we have to have points where we can pull the wire through this, is they put in manholes. Now, to give you an idea how big the manhole is, remember I was talking about the dump truck? The dump truck will fit in that hole. So these are very large holes, which also means for traffic they're very dangerous holes. So the steel plates we put over top of them are very important, and we take very seriously how we support this with structural steel underneath it. This is the hole when they've actually put the line in. They're getting ready to lift the manhole into the hole. Here's the crane actually putting the manhole in. These manholes are about 8 foot to 10 foot wide and 20 to 22 foot long. And as I said, some of these manholes will be 12 to 14 feet deep. Some of them will go as deep as 20 feet. When the manhole is in, it's basically just a huge concrete box, particularly made for this use. It already has the holes in it for where the piping will go. They're now going to put the lid on it. You can see that they have a sealant there trying to keep water out of it. Those square holes turn into finished manholes that you see on the street when you come across a manhole and you see it paved. That's what it started looking like before that metal cover was put over it. At the end of each day, we go through, we steel plate over anything that's possibly a hazard to drive on. Those plates are all welded together and they're pinned with steel. Now, even so, we have a lot of areas that have high truck traffic and bus traffic in it. So sometimes these things pop loose in the middle of the night. We always ask the neighbors to give us a call. If they hear any kind of metal sound from the plate, we'll go out in the middle of the night, we'll repair the plates again. Because some of the buses, they get a little speed up and they start bouncing on those plates and the welds can break. When we finish it, we have the plate recessed into the asphalt. Any kind of surface that comes up, we put what they call KP or cold patch around it to smooth it out, so it's as smooth a driving surface as possible. When the road's finished, the road will go back to looking like a standard brand new road. So as we finish up, you're going to wind up with new, clean, well-paved streets. One thing to be aware of is we only work for limited hours every day. We only work from 9 to 9:30 till 3:30. That's all the county and the municipalities are permitting us to work. That keeps us off the road during the high traffic times. But it also means that it cuts down the window that we have to work every day. So instead of having a full work day, we've got about 4 or 5 hours out there on the site that we really get to work. So it does, again, it adds to the length of time it takes us to get through your neighborhoods. Now, after the paving is done, I'll bring up Mr. Charlie Schupler. Going to chew on that. The engineer with Pepco can explain to you the process of installing the cable after we're completed.
So after Rich and his contractor has finished doing all the civil work, which is the dirt, the disruption, and everything's repaved, we have to go back and actually put the electrical wire in the ground. So all we have to do is go back to the manhole lids. So we put in these huge manholes, but all we're doing is we're pulling cable from manhole to manhole. So we'll set up what we'll do is we'll, I don't know which one's the, oh, wrong button. There you go. All right, so this is depicting the truck pulling up to one of the manholes. So we're not digging any dirt. We're pulling up in front of a manhole here. We're popping the lid. These are the cable reels that are on the back of a truck that drives up. The cable is fed down into the manhole, through the manhole lid, into the vault in the ground, into these conduits here that were just installed. And then it's pulled the 3,000 foot approximately between our manholes, and it comes out the manhole at the other end. Now before that, what we do is we pull a pilot line through. It's just steel wire that's attached to the end of the cable, and there's a winch at the other end, and the winch truck just pulls the cable through. It's a very, very slow process. We're not flying the cable through, but it's completed in several hours. But it's a one-day thing or several days per manhole. But it's not a several month-long process. Once the cable is pulled in from each manhole to each manhole, we have to connect them. I like to we do what we call splicing. Simplistically, it's plugging an extension cord together. It's that joint, the sockets together. It's a little more intense than that, but that's, in simple terms, that's what we're doing. We are connecting the two cables. We're splicing the cables together. And once we have spliced it, we go back from every manhole along the line, do these splices. We perform testing from end to end. And once it passes our tests, it's then energized, so then it is now carrying electricity. So construction for this project began in September. It's scheduled to continue through 2020. The civil work, which is the digging in the street to put in the duct bank and the manholes, started in September of 2017 and scheduled to go through the spring of 2020. Towards the end of that, as the civil construction is finishing up, we're going to start doing the electrical construction, so pulling the wire through the conduit that was installed. I think we showed the route map earlier showing the main roads we're going through, and Rich touched on the hours, but here they are in writing the hours we're allowed to work on the street.
So who's working on Saturday then? And who's working after 3:30? Because I've been hearing people working on Saturday and after 3:30. Which is someone else?
When we work on Saturday, it's for one reason or another, we're at a stage where the county allows.
Can I ask you to say that into the microphone? So we can get it for people who are watching?
When you see a crew out there on Saturday, it's typically trying to pick up more schedule. In other words, we've had an extremely wet July, August, September, October this year. Far wetter than probably we've ever had on record. So when you see crews out there on Saturday, they try to work the same hours, but they are just trying to play catch up on the days that we lose to rain.
And the people working after 3:30 are also playing catch up? They're also...
If the crew is there after 3:30, like this evening there were 2 crews, we had 11 crews on the street this morning. We had 2 of the crews that were there a little bit late. Now typically that's because the concrete deliveries are coming late, because we can't control when the concrete trucks arrive. Or for some reason they're having trouble closing the hole up. If they have dirt caving in, they're doing extra excavation or extra shoring. And sometimes that will make them delay another hour, possibly an hour and a half. Say again now?
council, of course, pick back up, and it's like it's a grand mess, and now you know that the mess is gonna go on up to 2020.
Well, in your particular area, when you're coming off of New Hampshire and going across Eastern Avenue, right? From New Hampshire to Whittier, there's a project that we have been coordinating with the city, that the city just has the blueprints coming off this month, to come in and literally shut that street down from one end to the other and completely replace the sidewalks, the substructure, and everything, some of the storm piping. So we've been coordinating to get out of that area so that when they hit there this summer, they can take over the streets and do that work.
But they're doing that in sections, right? So
Right, there's about 3 or 4 sections that go to
We've been
jail.
to the meetings for that, and that's not something that's gonna be completed in like one fell swoop in 6 months for all of it to be done. So my concern is that the quality of the road now, you're right. I mean, it's a lot worse than it was before. And I've watched the temporary asphalt in front of my house collapse a few times. So it's been patched, and I just see that happening until this project, until the road rehabilitation is done. And that doesn't seem.
We had a fire on Eastern Avenue under the ground this summer.
So when I guess my question, where I'm going with this, you know, you mentioned curb to curb resurfacing, but that's not for Eastern, right?
The project end to end is curb to curb resurfacing. The section that we're talking about, DC specifically held off doing some of the area. They originally had planned to do it simultaneous to us doing the ductwork. That was not physically possible to be done.
So you're saying we are just stuck with the temporary patching until DC comes in and does their project?
That's basically what the plan is right now, because there's still some piping that still has to go underground on our part before everything to Whittier will be clear.
And I think that's where my concern lies. I don't know if anyone else shares that concern, but
Can we, this is a very good conversation, but we still do have a few other slides that I do want to touch on, and then also some map discussion. I just wanted to know if we could, and then we'll pick up this discussion at the end. And I'm sorry, go ahead, Trevor's. Can you come to the mic, Trevor's?
Good evening, everybody. My name is Trevor Culpepper, work on the DC side. I know I've seen you at some of the ANC meetings. We definitely do try to coordinate with DI and all of the other utilities when we're performing work. A lot of times that may not happen simply because of our schedule and then what DDOT has, you know, as far as what their schedule is. But we have made efforts to try to coordinate as best we can, because we do understand, you know, definitely what you're saying as far as just the congestion and then the road itself. But we, you know, try in an earnest effort to coordinate as best we can. And sometimes that doesn't happen, unfortunately.
yeah, and we heard that from DDOT too. So
They didn't even know the meeting was gonna act on that. And you know, the presentation has its place and all that. I think that some of it, my frustration, and I heard from some of the friends that I had that live around it, is stuff that you're not talking about, like the noise, the blasting and the construction that goes on all the time. When you talk streets, there's an influx of rats and stuff like that is going on in people's houses that I've heard about. Again, I don't live over here, but I've heard the frustration from friends that I had to do. That's something, I really don't care about the cute things that you got here. I want the practical stuff, and when it's gonna be done, because we live here. This is
Right. And it's and as far as the schedule is in the rest of the presentation, but I will say that as far as with DDOT, you know, we met with them on site, as Rich has stated, to try to get an understanding of what their timeline is. We've had conversations with them in the past, so it's not like our first time going to them, you know, actually, you know, trying to let them know what we're doing. This has been a conversation that has been had before this project. You know, we reached out to them prior to us even starting. So it's, you know, we know that they have a project going on, and they know that we have a project as well. It's just the coordination, and it's unfortunate. I know Yeah. Well,
I'm sorry to be rude, but I live on Eastern, it's practically at my door, okay? On the DC side, on October 31st, one of my neighbors, I live in an apartment complex, one of my neighbors, we had to do a wellness check on her. And in order to do that, we had to summon our property manager. She was not able to navigate the detour to get to her. Unfortunately, she died. And I'm not saying that that's attributable to the property manager not getting there timely enough for us to get inside and actually find her. She's a young woman. But my point is, what the property manager told us was that she was not allowed to navigate around the detour to get into our property in order to give us access to the unit to check on her. So I have a concern about that, and I know that you can't have everyone disrupting the work site,
Right.
but I think there needs to be some exception to allow someone to enter the perimeter when there is an extenuating circumstance, because when the paramedics arrived, of course, they were able to enter the perimeter because they were emergency personnel, but the property manager was not allowed to do that. So I have a concern about that.
Well, you're talking about the apartment building on Eastern Avenue?
Right adjacent to the metro station, there's only a fence between our property and the metro station. So it's 750, right where the mailbox is at the end of the driveway. That's where we're located at.
Talking about the wash and gas work.
Okay, so I wasn't sure if, I didn't realize that there were multiple utilities doing projects there, but, so that's not a part of this project?
That is a part of the coordination between Washington and Gas moving some gas lines so that we can put our work in. There have been a couple of confusions that have happened around the neighborhoods because you have Washington Gas working, you have WSSC working, doing water line work, and we also have Pepco doing work all at the same time. So I know that I'm constantly coordinating with the different municipalities because when there is a problem, sometimes it's hard to identify who's involved in it. The reason I was questioning that is because our crews specifically make sure emergency vehicles get through. A good example, we had a gentleman over on Takoma Street. His daughter went out at 11 o'clock in the morning. We stopped work, put steel plates down, helped her get her car back out on the road every day until we were finished that section.
And again, the issue is not allowing the emergency vehicles to get through. The issue was that the property manager, who was on her way to allow myself and another party into this unit to check on the neighbor, she was not allowed to. She was delayed. So it wasn't until we got in and actually found her that we summoned the paramedics, and we found her unresponsive, and unfortunately she died. So that's why I was concerned about, I understand you can't have everyone disrupting the perimeter as work is going on, but I just thought that in an extenuating situation where someone was trying to get through as the property manager attempted to get through for that purpose.
Very unfortunate situation you're describing. We go through a lot of trouble training our people to do something different. I can't speak for every contractor, but I can speak for our personnel. Our personnel specifically want to know what homeowners need. They want to know what businesses need. If the business has a delivery truck, we stop construction, put steel plates down, get the truck in. One of our guys, and these are things you can't train people to do. I drive up on the site and I look over, and one of our guys is walking a man down the street, over on Fenton Street. The man was blind. But because we had rerouted the buses, the only sign the bus company had put up wasn't in Braille. This poor man's standing there waiting for a bus that wasn't coming. But our people took the initiative to walk over to see him, walk him down to the bus stop where the bus was running. This is the kind of thing we expect from all of our crews. Now, I know that we have shut down several times when emergency vehicles have come in. We've thrown steel plates down, moved our equipment off the street to get the trucks in and out. But it's very unfortunate they had a bad experience like that, because I know the contractor that's there, and there really was no excuse for them to deny any kind of access. Nothing that we're doing is more critical than someone's life. If you give me just a minute and let Charlie finish the presentation, and we can go into some of the other areas you were talking about with Eastern Avenue. There's more information I can give you on that. Let's let him finish this presentation, then I'll pick up on that, okay? Thank you.
All right, so back to our construction. So our contractor is actually designing, or not designing, we've designed the location of this duct bank. We don't just turn it over and say, hey, get the duct bank from A to B. We've gone out and we've designated the existing utilities in the street. Some of these streets have more utilities than dirt in them. So we have to come up with an alignment to snake our way from our substation to the next substation. Like we said, limited spaces available. We've kind of touched on some of the civil construction. Rich touched on it when he went through, but there's traffic control. We're closing down lanes to do our work, trenching the steel plates. Then we install the duct bank, which is in front of me. This is what's going in the ground. Rich kind of touched on it slightly earlier, but it is very large. That's part of the reason the construction takes so long. Once we've installed this duct bank, we'll go back, backfill, do the temporary restoration, which everyone has experience. And then once we've certified from duct bank to duct bank, we go through and do the permanent restoration. And I believe I already touched on the electrical construction on the previous slide. So Rich, do you want to talk about the construction progress here in Takoma Park?
Yeah, basically what you have up here on the screen is the work that's going on going through the city of Takoma Park. Now this particular one goes from Piney Branch Road up right past the college and up towards Philadelphia. This particular segment is under construction right now. Most of the areas next to the college are being shut down during the day, and the area down there near Piney Branch is just now reopening for one-way traffic or one-lane traffic. Now, as we're doing the work in Takoma Avenue, I want to give you some examples of different things. This particular one, we have a street shut down. This is next to the college. We shut down the entire street, and if you'll see the arrows, we detour the traffic around so that it doesn't involve the construction site at all. Now, those detours take care of buses as well as car traffic. They're set up at 9 o'clock in the morning. They're down at 3:30 in the afternoon on most days. Now, on Fenton Street, let's see, go ahead and switch, Charlie.
This one?
This is the downtown Takoma Park area, which we're just moving into now. If you see where the little black squares are up there, that's where the manholes are actually already in the street on Cedar Avenue. We have a crew that's coming up towards Carroll. There's a crew right at the bottom, right above the Pepco sign at Laurel, heading toward that crew now. So this area in here will be handled a little bit differently. Next slide. In this area in here, we'll basically be shutting down half of the street, and we'll use flaggers to keep the traffic going in one lane. So we'll be alternating traffic going through the one lane area rather than shutting everything down. This way we keep the businesses open, we don't impact the businesses themselves, and then we work with the business owners to actually try to do everything we can to coordinate with their businesses, especially deliveries and any type of movement they have as far as vehicles coming in and out.
How long is this portion?
A portion like that's about 2.5 months. As we get farther down on Carroll Street, of course, you'll see Cedar coming in from the top left. Again, the same thing. We basically try to work a block at a time. One, so we can control the traffic. Two, so that we don't totally make a total mess out of the street with the traffic control. We try to keep our traffic controls about 500 feet apart, so there's time for the traffic to smooth out between hitting these blocked up areas.
All right, so high-level schedule. We're hoping that to complete, or we've already completed both duct banks between Takoma Substation and Whittier Street. That's this fall, but that's done. Complete both duct banks between Sligo and Bonifant. That I believe is that complete, Rich?
That's just now happening. They're in that section right now, they're working.
Okay. And complete civil work. So what we're doing is we're installing two of these, two duct banks. The first one is scheduled to be done by the spring of 19, and the second one done by the spring of 20. And then as these are finishing up, once the first duct bank's done, we're going to start pulling the electrical cable in there. And once again, everything will be wrapped up by the end of 2020 with the cable install. And then,
I live at the corner of.
Can you just move the mics that way we make sure everybody can hear you when we get you on the TV?
I live at the corner of Walnut and Eastern, and you guys have been there for at least 2 months. Is that right? No. 3 months, 4 months, and Walnut has been closed, you know, every day. What are you guys doing there? And it's not any of this stuff, apparently.
Actually, it is that stuff. What had happened at Walnut was they came down the bottom of the hill, and they had to tunnel under about an 80-year-old storm drain. So part of the work that was going on underground, about 20 to 24 foot deep, to get under that storm drain. That work just got finished at the end of last week, and they're making the final connection between that tunnel and the work that's coming up the hill right now. So in about a week, we should be out of that area completely.
Okay, so if that's the case, Tammy, you showed the card, right, saying this is what you sent a year ago, right? Have you guys sent anything else?
No.
Have you notified the residents at all about what's going on there?
For areas of new construction, we typically make notification with a door hanger for residents that are going to be immediately affected. But specific to this case, when we are doing construction on a 20-foot underground storm drain, unfortunately, no, we didn't communicate that to the residents because they were already notified about the construction project.
Would that be a lesson learned that you guys
Sure.
want
I
to
think
incorporate
lesson
in the
learned from
future?
this is a robust presence on the website, communication with our municipal officials about the status of work, and then of course, if residents have questions, we always make available both the hotline and the website.
Well, I mean, that's not adequate. It really is not adequate. You guys failed us. You seriously failed us because we've been living with this for, you know, how long, guys? 4 or 5 months. And it was only when, you know, our houses were shaking and, you know, our walls were cracking and you can't really, you know, my neighbor here can't have guests over for dinner or lunch, that we finally complained to our city council member, and there was no initiative by you to notify the residents on Walnut Avenue or Eastern Avenue in that long stretch there that this was a glitch in your project, that you guys had an unanticipated delay, and that therefore we were going to suffer as residents. And I think it's really inexcusable. I think it's really inexcusable, and I want to know what you guys are going to do about it, because this is going to happen throughout this project. You know, you guys are talking about going through the heart of Takoma Park, and you're going to find all sorts of things like this in further parts of Takoma Park. You can't do this to us. You can't say, well, we have a website, we have an 800 number, we hung something on your door. No, that's not sufficient. You need to come back to us and tell us that there's going to be severe disruption to our lifestyles, and you have to tell us that on a regular basis, okay? Keep us updated. Now, you said that this is going to last another week. What kind of assurance do I have about that? And once it's finished, are the steel plates going to still be there?
No, the steel plates will be gone. There'll be asphalt paving there. They were out there on the street tonight putting the steel plates back in because they put the pipe in today. We'll probably pour concrete tomorrow on the last section that's due there.
So,
Now-
so would that have been nice to communicate that to us?
Well, when we go into an area, we door hanger the houses.
Door hanging is not enough.
Sir, but help me here a second. What we don't have is a way of communicating to every homeowner. There isn't a method unless someone can suggest it. I'll be happy to do it because I'm the guy who does it. I'm the guy who goes out, knocks on the door, and meets the manager of every business.
You can go to our local representative.
Well, we actually do.
And our local representative can say to us that, you know, there is a glitch in the house. You know, we have a listserv in the neighborhood.
We actually are on the listserv.
So I've seen no communication on the listserv.
I'd be more than happy to work with you and your civic associations. I mean, we're not here to withhold information. If we're not doing something, we want to be responsible. If there's a better outlet, we're willing to
The cow's already left
do
the
it.
barn.
Okay.
You know, you guys missed a real opportunity here. Now, my second question to you guys is once this cable is in the ground, is there any other work that's going to be done on Eastern Avenue?
Once we complete the work that's going on out there now, which will be next week, we'll be out of Walnut, and Walnut will be open again. That's for this line that you see right here in front of you. Now,
Well, let's his question first.
Within about 6 months, we're going to have to come back in and put the second of these lines in because this assembly requires 2 identical to this to go in. It's going to be on the other side of the street, coming right back up Eastern Avenue.
Okay. So is that the extent of the work that's going to be done on Eastern Avenue and in that stretch? And then once you have the cables in the ground, when does the street get repaved?
When we go through and put this in, we run this mandrel here through from manhole to manhole.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I get that.
We
I
pull
get-
that through
I get-
from
I get-
manhole to
I get-
manhole.
I get
Once
all
we do that, we turn it over to them to pull the cable in.
Right.
Once they pull the cable in, but by the time the cable's finished pulling, our paving crews are going to be back there finishing. But do understand this: in your particular section, we've been told by Washington Gas there's a gas main that's coming down that street that we don't know about. Okay, now I do not know whether that gas main's coming down there, but I've been told by Washington Gas people that there is a gas main down there because they've been out there twice in the last couple of weeks to fix lines. We don't control the other utilities. We only know what we have and what they communicate to us. We communicate to Washington Gas and WSSC along with Pepco. There's a big communication that goes on all the big capital projects.
Okay. So there's the potential that we may have gas work going down Walnut Avenue.
There's that potential, sir, yes.
And do our elected representatives know what the schedule for that is? Yeah.
They haven't responded to us because it's D-State, and we've been trying to get a hold of them. I mean, part of this issue, I mean, is that this is in D-State.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I will say that, we've been communicating.
Yeah, Kate, come on. You know, part of this issue is this work is being done in the District of Columbia, not in the city of Takoma Park. And so our staff, we've been trying to coordinate with Pepco. As I said, we've been trying to get a hold of Washington Gas to find out what's going on, and they're not responding to us. One of the things that no, Bill, I wish they would. I will say that, you know, in the last 2 months, because of this project, as we saw, it goes all the way through Takoma Park. One of the things that we did start about 2 months ago was getting a 3-week look ahead for the project that is posted on the city website. And I know Casey and I can, you know, figure out a better way to get communication out to you all. But that was one of the things I think it was about 2 months ago we started that.
We've also held 2 additional community meetings with the help of your Peter Kovar and
right, in Ward 1. So Peter's been held 2 meetings. And so we've been trying to figure out how to get the information about what's happening each week and 3 weeks ahead for that. And so I will say, I'm not, you know, everyone could have done a better job communicating. In the last few weeks, Pepco has really been much more responsive, and we've been trying to figure out ways. Washington Gas is like MIA for us. And we've been trying to communicate. I know some people here have also talked about trying to communicate with DDOT as well. I mean, ideally, this would be a meeting that everybody was available for and coordinating with. We have Pepco here, and they're answering our questions. So
Also, to help you understand a little bit, utilities are always monopolies. Pepco, I will give Pepco credit that they do a lot more community outreach and do a lot more communicating with the public and even with the other utilities than the other utilities do with us. As contractors, I've been doing this for over 40 years. I really don't die at this color. It hasn't gotten better. Pepco's doing things on this project that haven't been done before. They're reaching out more to the public, trying to do more of these sessions. We call Washington Gas and a customer's out of service. They do not react to us any faster than they do to you. That's very disappointing. They left a customer on Eastern Avenue with no heat overnight. I was furious. If the customer had my home phone number, she called me, I would have drove up from Virginia and turned the gas on myself because I happen to be licensed to do that. I don't particularly care about Washington Gas's problems. I'm much more concerned about the fact that you as our neighbors are our customers. But these utilities do get an attitude like this. I've seen it with Baltimore Gas and Electric in Baltimore. The same type of problems where we don't get the communications we want. We stretch and try. I know that Pepco does a better job than the others do. But it is not a perfect system, and I don't know an answer to it.
Can we?
I just want to add one other thing. As our Director of Public Works here, Daryl, has been working on collecting a calendar that we're still trying to get the rest of the information from Washington Gas and DDOT and some other places, but a calendar that would provide us with the sort of information that we want, which is that schedule of when is all of this going to be happening, so that we have that outlook. So hopefully, I want to thank Daryl for her work on that, and hopefully that's something we can pull together and have in the next month or so.
Okay, so I've got a couple of things that sort of were mentioned before, but not all of them. One is, I'm glad to hear the steel plates are going to be gone, because my biggest fear is winter is coming. I live on Little Eastern, below the wall.
Yes, ma'am.
And I feel like a Game of Thrones thing, winter is coming, I'm below the wall. But I'm worried that cars are going to go sliding and flip over and bad things are going to happen. So if that's gone, that's great. I am concerned, however, you mentioned fire underground on Eastern Avenue, and I believe that's happened more than once, and I don't know what's going on there with smoke coming out from Big Eastern and all of that, so that's one thing. Another thing is, because the work doesn't necessarily finish at 3:30 every day, we don't know when we're driving home, can we get into our street or not. I understand that you're not going to know all the time when you're going to be done. Is it possible to put signs up farther away, so that when we're a few blocks away, we know that we can't get through there, and we can, there's 6 different ways to get to my house. But if I don't know that it's going to be blocked off, I'm going to go the quick way and then find out it's blocked and then go 3 blocks out of my way and around. So that's one thing.
Sure.
So there's that. Was there another thing? There was the sliding plates, there was the fire underground, and there were the signs. That could be all my things. You have the other thing. What's the other thing? Also my household.
Yeah, hi. So this is a pretty small thing in the grand scale of things, but we have a crosswalk that we can't repaint because your water runs down every day from what you're doing, and that's a safety hazard, and there's so many children in our neighborhood, and they just don't have a crosswalk, and that's dangerous.
This is the across Walnut, parallel to Eastern.
Walnut's a unique place. Across the street, just up the street from Walnut, the first street going up, there's an underground spring coming down the street. One that we did not know about when we started working on the job, but one of the neighbors was good enough to tell me about. Each day when they open that site, if it hasn't rained for a week, they still have 3 feet of water to pump out the bottom of that hole. That's one of the reasons we've been there so long. The hole had to be 20 feet to even enter the area where the storm line was. So there has been a lot of water every day having to be pumped out of there, into bags, going down the sidewalk. It's an inconvenience. It isn't something we can get rid of. Now, once we pave over and seal it back, of course, it's going to be gone. But during the construction, when we've got an underground spring or leaking water lines, we have to get the water out of the hole or we're never going to get finished. So I do understand that. Now, as far as the plates, one of the reasons it seems like we've been so long in your area is we've been coming down that hill. We've been coming down the hill from, there's manholes right up on the top of the hill from above Walnut. So we've been coming down that hill. So the plates have been there for a long time. And I'm sure it's been an inconvenience. I'm not sure if you all or some of the neighbors I've talked to on the phone, but because the buses run through there, the plates break loose frequently. We send crews out there in the middle of the night. We send crews out there on the weekends to have to re-weld and repin those plates down. But the buses, the moment they get across that hill, think it's the Indianapolis Speedway. That road in general has been a very tough spot. It would be nice to tell you that I can always warn you when something's going to happen. Every day I drive the job sites early, during the day, and at the end of the day. Tonight I drove them after the day, and 2 of my crews were still out there. The crew on Walnut was still there and was just closing up at 5 o'clock. I stopped and asked why. I said, because I don't want to find out when I walk into the meeting you were still here, because they're supposed to be off at 3:30. But they had some problems trying to get the holes closed up and getting everything welded up, so they ran late. I had another one where the road was caving in while they were trying to close it up. They had to stop, re-dig, and re-shore the road up next to the college in one spot. So these things happen, but this is a process that's in motion. It isn't something that we know. If it's something that we know 2 weeks in advance, you would know. But most of the things that happen in our business don't happen that far out in advance. We're reacting rather than acting. The fire part, we found some broken fireworks that someone had dropped in the hole of the plate. We do not know we cannot forensically tell you for sure it was set off by fireworks or if it was set off when they welded the plate that day and a little piece of slag fell down and hit it. We weren't notified at the time the fire department came out there, which somehow that got dropped inside the system. We did not find out until we came back the following Monday. But there's only been 2 occasions on the last 17 or 18,000 feet of pipe that we've put in that this has happened. One of them was a welding slag. Like I said, we don't know what that one was, fireworks or not, because that had to be cut out, completely replaced, and be redone. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. As far as you all coordinating and connecting with DC, is there a meeting that's going on tonight now on Eastern Avenue that might be the DC meeting like this? Because
no,
not that I know of.
Councilmember Todd had sent an email and said that there was this Pepco meeting was supposed to be there.
It was the same meeting, wrong address.
Okay. I think. Okay, all right. I do think that, it's good to have Pepco's information and for whatever it's worth. But again, I need to know, I just as a DC Ward 4 person that travels here and having friends in the area that I'm kind of speaking on their behalf, we need to know what's going on with all of the groups. So you finish Pepco and, then when your house is shaking on February 10th, there's not Pepco anymore, then it's Comcast or whoever. We need to know what's going on. The houses are shaking, the rats are up, this is going on, the streets are tore up. The streets were bad before, now they're worse. And the frustration is, not that you all are doing these great things, whatever, okay, whatever. It needs to be done, and I get it. But people do need to know how to function in this world of new, because I was one of the persons who complained about it in my Ward 4 DC side to Todd, because I couldn't understand how Bowser could come out of Ward 4, Fenty could come out of Ward 4, and he's in Ward 4, and Eastern never got the good paving that North Capitol got and 13th Street's gotten. And so he said, oh, we're going to do it now, and then it got worse instead of better. And now it's because it's not just paving, it's, building a little city underground. But again, all of the things that have come up, You're not talking about that on the slide. People's houses are shaking. People are being, you know, disrupted in their whole world because of the explosions or the banging or the whatever you want to call it. And to me, if I lived over there, the rats would be a deal breaker for me. We need to know how we can get that addressed. And I don't know that you can necessarily say these are the Pepco rats or the gas rats or whose rats, but this is not a good thing. And I just, you know, and people who live on Eastern, I don't know how they stand it, but we need some practical conversation about that, because that is what's really going on. Beyond this stuff and all of that, people are living there, and their world is being disrupted. They put a lot of money and good things into their house, and it's turning into a demolition zone, and I don't think it's fair, and there's nobody who's talking about that, so I'm bringing that. Please take that back to Mr. Todd, because somebody got to talk about, have that kind of meeting, and I thought that was this meeting.
Rich,
Well, but this meeting is exactly for that purpose.
Rich, can I touch on one thing? So when this project was conceived many years ago, even though Eastern Avenue exists in D.C., a lot of the outreach was Maryland focused because the nexus of the project was Maryland.
Okay.
So I think for a long time there were missed opportunities for engagement on the D.C. side. And then if you'll also recall at the same time, and I think Trevorris has come to your ANC and spoke about this, it was the capital grid. So there was a confluence of projects and interests, and it just seems that unfortunately the missed opportunity was outreach with Council Member Todd on the issues affecting.
But I'm just really talking about that because you still need paved streets. And
correct.
Whether it's the Maryland Eastern side or the DC.
Well, the road's a DC road.
Eastern Avenue has been a wreck for a very long time.
Yes, it has.
Oh my God. And it shouldn't have taken this kind of stuff to get somebody to say, oh, we should pave Eastern Avenue. And before you pave it, you're going to tear it up, and everybody who lives in the area is going to be subjected to.
Well, yeah, we can only address.
I'm frustrated.
I understand.
And I'm just frustrated for, you know, like I said, my family, my friends, whatever. But my main thing is just driving it. That should never have been allowed. Whether it's Todd, Bowser, whoever it is on the DC side, you all on the Maryland side, it has been a wreck. And they do a little patching. Oh, we did a little patching. And then that turns into a dip. And the dip's and it's on this side, that side. What? And it's not like we're the only people. You all travel it too.
Mm-hmm.
This evening before the meeting, I drove end to end the site.
Say what?
I drove our site end to end. I drove from New Hampshire across Eastern Avenue right on up to here. And I did it for a purpose. Because there's a lot of potholes popping up in Eastern Avenue.
Popping? Like now?
You know, if you're coming in here tonight, you can see them. There's potholes all over the place. The problem is the potholes are outside of the temporary patching.
But
the road itself. But
hold on.
Realize our job is to restore after construction. I've been coordinating since last October with the engineering firm doing the drawings for this DC retrofit project that's just now coming off the boards. These all projects, whether they're utility projects like we're doing, whether they're paving projects, these things wind up being years in planning, drawing, appropriating, bidding, and getting out there. Well, we were originally told this project was going to start this summer. When I talked to the engineer last October, we mobilized this job to get out of Eastern Avenue so they could start this summer. When I met with the engineer, I met her by accident because I was down at DDOT meeting about the bicycle path over on Piney Branch, and they were good enough to walk us into the other meeting. And I met the engineer and she said, oh yeah, the prints will be out soon.
I understand that you all don't have control over DDOT, but is there anything, this is your contractor, right? And you all have driven Eastern Avenue?
Yeah.
I mean, you know what I'm talking about. It's like you're off-roading in your car every day.
Eastern Avenue is very, very rough.
The road's going to be completely reconstructed.
I'm aware. I've been
In 2020, right?
Yeah. And so I'm just asking, is there anything that can be done in the meantime until the DDOT project starts? Because as it is now, it is not a reasonable temporary fix. Because we have no confirmed start of when DDOT is going to happen. We know that the project has been delayed and could continue to be delayed. We ask almost every week for an update from Councilmember Todd's office. We don't get great updates. And I'm left with just a crappy road that I live on that we're wondering, like, oh, are we going to blow our shocks this week or blow our tires this week? Because it's going to be one of the other.
Eastern Avenue is a bad road. Before I started the project, I drove that same path with my iPhone sitting on my dash. You had a pretty crappy road before we started. That's what was sad. The road was really in bad shape then. Now, when we come in, that just makes it worse. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. We go through, we pave it smooth. That doesn't mean over the next month or two that paving doesn't get bumpy. That road is very bumpy. I'm not going to sit here and tell you it isn't. Anything that happens right now, especially this time of the year, is going to be a patch. Whether if I had DDOT's engineer standing here right now, he'll tell you our patching crew will come out and patch it. Nothing will happen in paving until spring.
That's helpful to hear.
It's honest in the business.
She said that Eastern was going to be repaid this week. Earlier, like about 20 minutes ago, I thought I heard you say that Eastern would be repaid this week.
No, ma'am. We were talking about over on Walnut Street, where Walnut and Eastern are. That area we will be getting out of. As far as the paving, the worst part of Eastern Avenue is coming right off of New Hampshire and trying to make it across the hill to Kansas. That's the worst section of road, probably in D.C. But
And if we lived on West End, this would not be.
But see, if the snow starts falling, they'll shut the asphalt plants down, and there won't even be any hot mix to patch with until springtime. That's what's been happening for years. Occasionally, they will leave an asphalt plant. We've already been checking with asphalt plants to make sure they're going to be open to make our temporary patches. We only know of 2 that have guaranteed that.
So that's actually my question. Do you take into consideration, sorry to jump in, but since you're right there with it, do you take into consideration a potentially rough winter in your time estimates, or does that add on loads of time if we get shut down for snow over and over and over again?
Our projects are basically built in that we know there's going to be a certain amount of weather. But this year, for instance, you don't normally have constant rain July, August, September, October. It just doesn't happen. That you can't predict. There's probably 25 or 30 days on my calendar where we couldn't work because the holes were full of water, and we couldn't work the next day because we spent the next day pulling the water out of the hole.
Can you, Pepco and your constructor, can you make a promise to us that as the weather affects the timeline, that you will keep us updated on that? So that we're all thinking 2020, but if that gets pushed and pushed and pushed because of bad weather, it would be very helpful to know.
The commitment that I can make is that as the weather affects our schedule, that's what we share with our stakeholders.
Okay, thank you.
That's why we've asked for the 3-week
Yeah.
look ahead so that we can keep better track of that.
Okay.
That was the thinking behind that.
I think we had a question over here.
Yeah, I have a.
I don't want to lose track.
Just a question. I appreciate that all of you are here and spending your time, and everybody's here tonight. Like, it's important that community talks about this, and that you're taking a lot of frustration about things that we can't control, like the DDOT and all those kinds of things. I am concerned though about the steel plates and the length of time that I've been hearing it, and my walls have been shaking, like the metal on metal. You know, like you said, it got delayed, and so like the plates were out there much longer. And when they come back and come down the other direction on Eastern Avenue, I live right at Walnut and Eastern, just about on the DC side, and the walls are shaking, and I'm concerned about the building structure.
Okay.
Has there been any sort of study about like what's the engineering behind that? Like, what's a safe amount of time for that to be exposed to, like, all night, every night? You know, I have 2 little kids. They don't sleep great anyway, and, like, their room is on the other side of the house, and they're still kind of being woken up by that. And so I'm just curious, like, next time, now that we're at the end of this part of the project, like, when it comes back down the other direction, is there going to be additional communication about that? Is there going to be additional, like, information about what structures can reasonably withhold with that kind of loud noise? What's that?
To help you.
Yeah.
If anybody has concerns before you leave tonight, this is my business card. It has my cell phone on it. Take it with you. I have been in at least 20 of your neighbors' homes. I've inspected their foundations. I have filmed their foundations. I have checked their sound vibrations. I carry a sound meter with me. I'm a mechanical engineer. I deal with sound all the time. Sound transmits through the air, and it transmits through the ground. As I was explaining to you earlier about the reason we cut the concrete, it's so that the transmission, when we're in the ground with the machines, it's very hard for it to transmit through ground, but it'll shoot straight through concrete. Now, the other sound you'll hear, and I've had neighbors call me up for this, they'll call me up, my windows are shaking. Yeah. That's a legitimate thing. What it is sound transmitting through the air. We can go up there, we can test the level of the sound. Most of that is an observation by you that will not harm your home. But to reassure you, we will come out, we will check your home, we'll film your basement for you, give you a copy of it to make sure that there aren't any damages to your home. Because then we had, you mentioned somebody that one of the neighbors in your area had some cracks under the house and they had rats coming in the house. I was actually in that house. And all the damages in that house existed before we ever got there. We showed them, I sent them pictures from 3 years ago before we got there that all the cracks in their walls, the cracks in the sidewalk and everything were already there. And I feel sorry for it. It's an older couple. I feel sorry for them. They have cracks in their drywall and different things. I came up as a building contractor. My dad was a building contractor. So I'm very familiar with all kinds of construction. But when I go in their home, we went in to look, but unfortunately the damage in their house is just the house has been old and settled. And as we talk about Eastern Avenue being a tough street, let's also remember this. Eastern Avenue is a main thoroughfare for buses. It's a main thoroughfare for trucks. And unless someone comes out there and paves it every 2 years, it is always going to be a rough street. Yeah, even when they come in and build the whole new substructure.
But they haven't.
Yeah.
But once they do, once the district does, in a couple of years, there'll be a lot of damage to that road because that is a high impact travel pattern. And that just adds to the aggravation of it.
Don't you think, though, that the length of time that the steel, because like this, the worker crews during the day is not necessarily, like it's loud, my husband works from home and it's loud, he can hear it all day, but what I'm most concerned about is that metal plate on plate kind of, that I hear all night, every single night, you know, like I hear
what we tell our neighbors, what we tell all the neighbors is
doesn't that
this.
exacerbate the problem?
If there are steel plates near your house, if you hear an echo of boom, 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 boom sound, don't worry about it, everything is good. If you hear any kind of clank, clank.
That's what I'm hearing.
When you hear a
that's
clank.
What my neighbors are hearing every
When you're
night.
hearing a clank, you
night.
take my card and call me, we'll get a crew out there, because that means the buses have broken the weld.
And that's what I'm concerned about, is that it seems like that happens every day. You know, and maybe that's like the process and it's still safe and all that kind of stuff, but it doesn't seem that way to me because 30 minutes after the crew leaves, you know, a bus comes down and like, ba-dum, ba-dum, and I can hear the clanking noise the next time, you know, and like there's buses all night and you know.
We will come out, look, if you're worried about them, we'll come out.
Is that concerning?
I'd rather come out
from a structural
because
standpoint.
you were afraid just to make sure and satisfy you. I'd rather do that.
And how soon can you come out?
We're out there within about an hour of you calling us. We have crews that live close by. We have all of our equipment parked over the yard over on Riggs Road. We'll run through there, we'll grab a welding truck, we'll come out here. If we need a machine, the machines are there.
I mean, I just think you're going to be there every night.
And that's entirely possible. That's entirely possible.
If we have plates breaking loose.
Then that's a different deal.
Right.
You know, that's a safe thing and it's not harming the structure and like the engineering has been done that tells me that for 4 months, because I moved in at the end of July, it started in August, it's been here since then, like that after 4 months of that kind of every night, all night long kind of noise is not affecting the structure of the building, then if you can tell me that, okay, I believe you. And then next time when it's coming back down in another direction, can we talk about the length and the timelines and all of that kind of stuff? Because that would be super helpful.
And I would just say that since we have someone from Councilmember Todd's office here, is there any way that we could look into rerouting some of the buses and the truck traffic the next time you have to come down? I mean, we've done it on the other part of this project. We've rerouted buses and we've done all these things. Is there any way we could look into that, since you're going to come back down the next side? And you know, everyone knows I live on the corner of Elm and Sycamore. I'm in this neighborhood every single day, driving in and out, and everything everyone has said. getting stuck because the crews are there past 3:30, and we understand why they have to be there. But the plates and everything, they are coming loose. And I know I've called myself and had neighbors, and you guys are out there, but you're going to be there every day. And so the next time this project comes down the other way, could we, now that we have a little time, think about rerouting buses or some of that truck traffic?
We could definitely pass it on, someone to look at for sure.
Can you also have Mr. Todd address how many other contractor companies are gonna be working in the street? So when Pepco leaves, who's next? And who's next? And who's next? What is the whole big plate? So we're not just dealing with fix it up, Pepco fix it up, and the next crew that comes behind them and disrupts and tears up and has the house shaking. We need to know how many companies are working in the street?
Right, well, until DDOT confirms their
We just
contract.
need to know. I mean, all of it is it, you know, is it, you know, Xfinity,
Todd is our
Comcast, who else is
He could ask
involved
the
in
questions.
this?
We'll certainly ask the questions, absolutely.
If I can say, I can, Madam Commissioner, I know the, you guys is hired for the community relations folks of their extension of our board. I know the director very well, so I can touch with them.
I think we need to tell all of us, not just me. I mean, we all need to know, but we need to have some reasonable idea. So this is really not fair to beat up on Pepco. Pepco is just one piece of it, probably the biggest one now, but the frustration is not gonna end when they leave, whenever they leave. You know, this madness is not gonna stop.
No, we'll ask the questions, we'll submit any answers we can.
And we need to have, and we really do need a meeting with everybody there.
Can I go ahead and just ask the person who's at the mic who's been waiting so patiently if you had a question?
Yeah, I just have a quick thing. So I'm a senior in high school. I get home at 3 o'clock. And the quickest way is down the Eastern Avenue in DC and take a left on Walnut. And I get that you have to be there. That's fine, whatever. But when I go around, I'm already adding time. And I get there, and for a while, you were just blocking off Walnut from Westmoreland all the way up to the Eastern Avenue in DC. Even though you weren't there, there was another street in between there. And so I would have to go all the way around, or I'd have to maneuver my car around your whole road closed sign, because I can see where the road's closed and it's not there. And then that stopped. I don't know if one of my neighbors complained or you finally figured out that people actually do live there. And now what you're doing is there's Walnut is like here, and then Eastern Avenue in DC is here. And you're cutting off this corner. Like, there's cones coming down, and you've got this much space to try to get around. So I can't go up Walnut and turn left, and people coming down the Eastern in Maryland can't get anywhere. And I've seen bigger cars try to turn around because they can't get around. And so I understand that some places are like out of commission during work hours. I know that's when you need to work. That, like, okay, but you're inconveniencing and almost completely blocking off streets that you're not doing anything on. And so I'd like to know if you can somehow communicate to your crews that that's a real street, there are real houses there, and sometimes people want to get home.
No, I think it's a reasonable comment. We try, when we have our meetings with our crews, to remind them to think like they live in the neighborhood. If I lived on these blocks, I can tell you I would not be sitting in those chairs any happier than you are. I'm not going to sit here and pretend what I do is an easy business. It's not. I know that what I expect from my crews is for them to take into account they're working in your neighborhoods. We drive our sites every day, and we move traffic control around if we think it's too long. We try to minimize the amount of impact we have. But like I said, it's a thing in flux. It's always changing. The main purpose of that traffic control, although an inconvenience to you, is protecting workmen. And of course, Madam Mayor, you know what I'm saying. When we start talking about rerouting buses off of Eastern, there isn't any place to send them. Eastern is the main thoroughfare to Takoma Park. Well, if we send them off onto some of those side streets, those people are going to go ballistic because there isn't enough room to get a car past on most of those streets.
But, I mean, I understand that, but I'm not asking about the Eastern Avenue in DC. I'm asking about the one in Maryland, which if you've been in the neighborhood, clearly, if you want to get there, you either have to go like around and up, or you go up Walnut. And so you can't reroute a bus there. That's not my question. And I don't understand construction. I don't really care about the specifics of construction unless it directly impacts people around me. But it's not workmen that are behind the cones. It's like there's room for whatever I don't know what it is. You can move it up, it looks like.
Sometimes it may appear that way, but realize those steel plates that are on the street, a lot of times when you'll drive by and you'll see a truck here and it looks like an open area there and there's workmen here. What you may not see is 3 or 4 1-inch thick steel plates stacked up in between, because it's the only place we could put them to keep them out of the road. So sometimes it looks like we're taking up a lot more real estate than we need. So it's deceptive sometimes when you drive by. We drive by for this reason. If we don't keep our traffic control as small as possible and as practical as possible, I know a young lady sitting here on the front row is going to be calling me. The guy sitting over there is going to call me.
Montgomery County.
They drive these sites every day too, and if they don't think that we have a good program in place, they're the first ones to call us and say, hey, you need to cut that traffic control program down, or it's in the wrong place. We have a lot of eyes on us watching after this, watching after your best interest. I can assure you, if we're rerouting you or we're not letting you go somewhere, it is strictly for your safety. It's not to inconvenience you.
And you'll understand if I say I don't think you really understand what I was trying to say.
Not to belabor this, I just want to speak to her issue on the Walnut. Probably why they moved those barrels down to Walnut and Westmoreland was because people were driving that one block of Walnut, not realizing they couldn't get across Eastern, turning around or going down Little Eastern. So we said, your traffic control's wrong. You got to stop cars from entering Walnut because they can't get through. So that's the reason they moved those down there. They might have gotten moved since then from other complaints. But to avoid all that turnaround traffic on that single block, unfortunately inconvenienced those people on Little Eastern that have to now go down Westmoreland to 2nd and back up Little Eastern. But the reason was to avoid the cars zooming up Walnut, and then some of them trying to get across Eastern through a road closure. So it was a very hazardous situation. So sometimes it's those kind of things. The inconvenience is definitely there, but the reason is all you had to do is stand and watch cars flying up Walnut, not being able to get through and having to turn around and come back around, and then they're really angry because they didn't realize the road was closed. So what we try to do in those situations is keep people from entering a road that's going to be closed ahead that they won't have a way out of. So anyway, that's
we'll have you and then you. She was waiting in line.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted I'm sorry I came in late, so I may have missed, I assume there was a whole big presentation on what's actually going on, but I live at Walnut in Eastern, and I'd like to just make sure that I have clarity on when you're going to be finished with this part, you know, from like Whittier down to the top of Eastern and Carroll. Like, when is that going to be done?
We'll be off of the intersection of Walnut by sometime next week. With the holidays coming, that's going to be late in the week.
So by Friday of next week, you think you're...
By Friday of next week, we should be out of that area completely.
Okay.
Now, we're still working up Eastern. Most of Eastern up to Laurel is done. So most of that right now, it's just staging with the equipment going up and down there. They're right now getting ready to cross into Laurel, headed towards Carroll Avenue.
And you have the steel plates there that are going to remain.
Right. There will always be areas of roughly 100 feet of steel plate in a given area. Because anytime we open the street, we can't get it open and get this assembly in a single day. So we have to put the steel plates there to protect the public from the openings.
And do you have an estimate of when those steel plates are gone, will be gone?
There will be steel plates in the road throughout this project. They're just going to be moving around to different areas.
So for that particular area that I'm talking about, when do you fix the road? When are the steel plates gone and then there's a road?
In the particular area you're in, the permanent paving won't be till sometime late next year, because we have to come back and put another line in parallel to the one we're putting in now. Has to come down Carroll Avenue all the way down Eastern to Walnut, And then there's some manholes up on top of the hill. It has to get them up to those.
And so steel plates will be there that entire time?
The steel plates will be there anytime we're working.
On both sides of the road? Or
No, they'll
one
only be on the
and
side
then-
of the road we're working. In other words, once we get the concrete, the red you see on this duct bank is concrete. Once we pour the concrete, we backfill it. As soon as we backfill it with recycled material, we start trying to put the paving on it so that it has an asphalt surface. So you have a temporary asphalt, then they return after all the construction's done and pave curb to curb.
Okay.
So at Walnut and Eastern, though, the end of next week, the steel plates will be out. And that'll
Right,
be
then we'll be out of there with the first line and headed on west towards Carroll.
And then you're saying, okay, so by the end of next week, we will not have those steel plates that are existing
correct,
right
ma'am.
now. Okay, thank you, because that was my question, whoever
Okay.
asked that. And then those yellow things that are hanging on top of the, what are those? Are they going to be
There's
gone?
warning tapes on the electrical wires overhead that were placed up there. I would prefer they stayed up there until we came back into the area. If they're a nuisance to someone, we'll have someone take them down.
I think they're unsightly. I'm not sure what they're helping, right? Because the lines are suspended above ground, far above.
The reason they were there is because our machinery comes very close to hitting them every day as we operate. There was one house that one of the machines, a contractor that we had to remove from the job, hit right in that area of Walnut, the brick house on the other side. That particular house, they hit his electrical line, had to run a new service to it. So to make it more visible to the operators, that's why those tapes were put there.
Do you think that since you'll be leaving that area, you can just take all of that out of there and then put it back in when you're back with the
Yes, we
equipment?
could. Yes, we can.
I think that would be helpful. I don't want to take too much time, but I just wanted to tell you that I think that for Walnut Street on the DC side, I think there's been a lot of new traffic coming up there, and I just wanted to make you aware that a lot of my neighbors' cars have been hit, and I think it's sort of not, it's not something that we've had happen with the amount of frequency that we've had before. So I don't know. I don't think that they're going into the Maryland side, because I think that as much, because I think it looks a little less, it's a little less clear that you can, where you can go. So I think a lot of people are coming up there. And we've also had someone, like, their tires were stolen. I'm not sure, like, yeah, sitting on bricks. That's never happened in the 40-some years I've lived there. And so I don't know if that's crews in there that are new, or I'm not sure what's happening, but that's kind of a strange thing that went on. I just wanted to clarify that what kind of, if we could just, before we leave, know what kind of notice we're going to be getting about all of these activities going forward, and whether there's going to be a meeting for the DC side, or, I mean, if that clarity is going to happen, and hopefully you're taking like a sense of what the questions are, you know, from tonight, so that, you know, when that presentation happens, we can just kind of start from there. I'm sure this was informative. I'm sorry I missed it, but at least we, oh, okay.
The City of Tacoma Park's website, we recorded it, so you can go back and watch.
Okay, that's helpful. Okay, and so, but at least at the end of next week, we will not have those steel plates.
Right.
And possibly those things hanging overhead until you.
And like I said, when you leave today, take one of my cards. When you got a question, pick up the phone and call me.
Okay.
That way I can tell you real time what's happening. That's what I do.
Yeah, but I think there's a sense that at least in the area, people need to know some notice, you know, of what's going to be happening. So, okay, thank you so much.
Sure.
I live at the corner of Walnut and Eastern, and as you can tell,
this is the Walnut and Eastern meeting.
You've got lots of feedback and how people feel about the project and the level of communication we got. So I appreciate that you haven't been overly defensive about this, and I do hope that you take it back and think about how you can communicate with your stakeholders a little bit better than you have in the past. For example, if you're on the listserv, just post on the listserv. I mean, that's an acceptable way to communicate with people. It doesn't reach everyone, but I think you're probably better off over-communicating than looking for the one silver bullet that's going to get everybody. So I just encourage you to do that. So you've talked about, and I'm thankful for the timeline that if you moved in there in July, I looked, we complained, and we sent a letter on August 12th about the steel plates in the road and the trash that was left behind by people every day. So that's 4 months.
You're the water bottles in the yard?
The water bottles, yeah.
Gotcha.
So it has been a long time. It hasn't been a couple months. It's been 4 months. And you've talked about coming back again on the other side of the street.
Yes, sir.
Is it going to be 4 months to do essentially the same project, 10 feet over? Right? You're going to have to go underneath this storm drain.
When they come under the storm drain coming the other way, it'll be a lot easier because we won't be fighting the natural spring until after we get out of the hole. In other words, the natural spring was a surprise. I only found it out from one of the neighbors up there when I was up at their house and I was filming their basement because they had windows vibrating in their house. Reasonable request.
GDOT knows about that spring.
That doesn't mean it ever gets on the drawings or it tells us.
Another point on coordination.
Well, no, yeah, but the thing is, those types of things, natural events like that, never show up on blueprints.
Yeah.
Those are things that we have to discover when we get out there. I know, and to follow up on your statement, there's a place I dropped the ball when we were notifying all the neighbors in there, and that was because we had a retaining wall. I didn't think we were going to be involving the neighbors on the other side of it. So I did not go down and put hangers on Old Eastern. So that's my fault for Little Eastern. We took care of the houses on the other side, and it was an oversight on my part. But we didn't, you know, you're 50 or 60 feet away from the site. We didn't figure you were going to be involved in it. We were wrong. The things that we ran into on the site caused it to go longer. Anything I say about it going longer now will only sound as an excuse, but that's because I've been doing this a long time, and I know what they sound like from the other side. We've had a tough area there. We finally know it's going to be over, and nobody wants to be out of that area more than us because there's been 20 or 30 steel plates up there. We've had street cave-ins and everything you can imagine up there. We still have 2 steel plates 20 feet down that we're not sure aren't going to be there permanently when we leave because we don't know if we can get them out. It's been a very tough site. And I'll be the first to tell you, the neighbors there have been gracious not to lynch us because we've been there a long time and I know this place has been noisy.
Well, having heard those steel plates being driven vertically into the ground with a front loader, the bucket of a front loader, like that's how you got it. I mean, that was very disruptive. And
sometimes it depends on the ground itself. If it's moist, usually the plates will just slide down.
Yeah, it didn't slide in.
There were some plates, especially about 100 feet up from where we are right now. I was probably in 10 different houses of people that their walls were shaking, their windows were shaking, the pictures on the walls were shaking.
I'll give you a testimonial. I mean, if you want a testimonial, I'll give you one. But
makes a lot of noise it transmits out.
Yeah.
And like I said, I'll happily come out and inspect anyone's home that wants me to check it because vibration can do damage. Most of the time what we do does not. But if we damage your home, we're going to make sure it's taken care of.
I was also interested, I know some people said they don't care about this, but what are the benefits of this project?
Benefits of this project are that the utilities in this area, the main power grid in this area, was put in back around 1950. In 1950, there wasn't a house in here that had more than a 60 amp service sitting on the wall. That's the amount of electricity coming from the pole into your house. Most of your houses have 200 amp services today. When this power grid was put in, there were no flat screen televisions. We weren't on the moon yet. You did not have central air conditioning. All of this growth and development that's happened just through normal changes in civilization has made the power consumption here 300 to 400 times greater than it was when the power grid was originally installed. So this is to get you more power available at the substations so there's always ample power coming out the pole.
Okay.
Yeah, it's also for another major component is aging infrastructure, like we touched on. They're very old lines, and we're trying to upgrade them to what we consider modern technology for transmission lines.
Thank you.
I think, oh, sorry. I can only echo, I think, what we're all expressing as this sort of collective infringement of our right to quiet enjoyment of our property. Having a newborn during this experience has been nothing short of heinous. We live on the top of Big Eastern between North Capitol and Whittier. So one of the sloped bungalows with the sloped driveways coming down. It's great that your workers have helped blind people. They also eat their lunches on our property and stop us from getting out of our driveways on a weekly basis. Sometimes it takes just 30 minutes to navigate a section of Eastern because you've closed off from the famous Walnut Eastern intersection, but you've also closed off from New Hampshire. And sometimes they're waving you around in a circle and you have to say, hey, I have an infant, I have to go to my house, and they're trying to get you on a side street and there's no way to get home. And to be honest, I think, and I understand it's been rainy, trust that you're in a community that is often Seventh-day Adventist or Jewish or just people who like Saturday, which they're entitled to do, and you are working after 3:30 on the regular, and you are working on Saturdays on the regular. And, you know, we are living with that. And we're trying to put our kids to bed, and the plates are really making that noise every night. It's not a whoosh. It's a click, click, clack. And we've had fires. We had that gas incident that someone referred to last week. Get it that that's not you. Just another degradation of our daily existence on this street that's going to go on to 2020. And, you know, we need, and it might be your subcontractor, it might not be your contractor, but we should be able to have ingress and egress to our property. What happens in the winter, because on a lot of these sloped driveways, you can't park up there. Before a storm, you have to park on the street because you can't get down because it's an icy, because those are all grandfathered in slopes that wouldn't be allowed today. Right. So where are we going to park our cars when it snows?
That's a legitimate question. It's a question that so far we haven't had to deal with, but it's a question that it does not go unnoticed. Our crews are trained that anytime you walk out and you tell them you need to get in or out, they're supposed to stop and make it available. Like I said, you take one of my cards also, you call me the moment you don't get in or out, because that's just not acceptable to us. We really train our crews to treat your neighborhoods as if they were their own homes, because it's not easy having all this to happen. And I would love to sit here and tell you I can go in and do this and never inconvenience you, and you know I'd be lying. There's no way for progress to go forward on utility work and not inconvenience people. And I wish I could do a better job of answering it from that standpoint, but that's all I know I can do. We're doing everything we can, but when someone gives us back a feedback, we try to look at that feedback as positive criticism of, okay, maybe there's something we need to look at, we can do better.
So what's the solution for the winter when the streets are snowed and you have the streets blocked off to parking because you're working?
As we come back up Eastern, we're going to be in the fall of the year coming through the area. A lot of it's going to depend on what time of the year we hit your area.
Okay, so between Whittier and North Capitol, sort of the top, where are those little bungalows with the slip driveways?
Well, the only piping that isn't done from right now, there's 2,000 feet of piping that isn't done between Whittier and 4th Street. Everything else from Whittier to New Hampshire is 100% complete, both lines.
Okay.
So we only have one section that still has to be put in.
Okay. And you're not staging up there anymore? Because you used to, I guess, you had a porta potty like right in front of our house. You had some staging right there. You're not going to be doing that anymore because the walnut work is going to be done, and you've finished our section. Is that what you're saying?
We're going to be gone for a few months before we come back the other way. In other words, we're going to come back to Whittier because we got out of the Whittier area to free DDOT up to do their work. So we're still going to be on Eastern. We still have another 20,000 feet of pipe to put in. But that's got to go in after we activate the first line.
Okay, I have a question. My name is Paul. I live in Pinecrest. It's a neighborhood that borders Eastern near 4th Avenue. Glad to see our neighbors are out here, DC and Takoma Park coming together. It's good to hear everyone coming out here today. My question is, I just want to get clarification on the purpose of putting electricity underground from Takoma Park to the Sligo substation. Is that to transmit electricity over to Silver Spring, or does it service? Does this line service anyone here in Takoma Park, or are we just moving electricity over?
You're basically feeding back and forth between two substations.
Okay.
That allows the power company to move power back and forth according to need.
Okay.
But it basically interlocks the two stations. The two stations are interlocked now, but by a much older grid.
But it's not necessarily bringing any power lines off the poles underground.
No, sir. Everything that we're doing is just
Okay.
between the stations and 100% underground.
Okay. Is there any project in the future to bring the lines underground that are along Eastern?
No.
No.
Just a heads up, that's something that DDOT said that they were gonna try to work
Look
with you
into.
guys on.
Yeah.
So,
Thanks for the heads up.
yeah.
Yeah.
Hashtag coordination.
Yeah. Okay. And then the other question, you know, as we were talking about Walnut and how you partially block off the street ahead of Eastern, sometimes that hadn't been done up, you know, on 4th and 5th and all, and it makes it difficult to turn around in those very narrow streets. So as a courtesy, I appreciate, you know, having road closed ahead signs so that we don't navigate down there and have to backtrack. And then also with the dump trucks, if, you know, again, as a courtesy, if you could reroute them to the main roads to get to the project site rather than through the neighborhoods, I'd appreciate that.
We try very hard to keep them only on main roads.
Yeah.
The only time that they're not on a main road is for some reason that we have traffic going one way up that road, that we've brought them around the block to get them back into the main drive. But we try to keep all of our trucks off of anything other than the main drives.
Well, my front door camera will tell you as the dump trucks rattle through the neighborhood, I have plenty of video alerts coming on my phone of dump trucks traveling through the neighborhood. So
take my card and send them to me.
Oh, absolutely.
That way, no, it gives me a chance. And this is when I come to these kind of meetings, I don't look at this as being a here's the chance to beat up Rich meeting. I don't look at these meetings that way at all. So many of you I never get to meet face to face. Sometimes I know you by email, sometimes I know you by a phone call, but the more feedback you give us, the better you're going to make us as contractors. Because the more that everything that you're saying is being filed away, and it's going to go back to our meetings with our supervision, our management team, and say, hey, look, the people are complaining about this kind of problems. Let's see what we can do to eliminate it. Every time someone makes a complaint, 20 people are involved. When someone, you know, if someone sends something off to Pepco to the hotline, by the time it gets back to me, there's 20 other people involved in it. It's a very expensive proposition for complaints. It's one of the reasons I give my personal cell phone number out. It is much easier for me to find out what your problem is and see if I can do something to fix it immediately. Besides, it saves a lot of money. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I might have actually been routed to you months ago because I had an issue with trying to do a detour, driving Takoma Avenue and being routed to, I believe it's Baltimore Avenue. I'm not sure, but it's a very narrow street.
Right.
In any event, on this occasion, I'm going down the street and I was stopped by a bus coming from the opposite direction, and I was forced to back all the way down the hill.
Yes, ma'am.
And the reason, and at the time I didn't know what the project was, but I went to a website and I ended up getting some feedback from someone who addressed the concern that the flagmen on opposite ends of the detour clearly had not communicated with each other, so that on my end where I was trying to come off of, I guess it was Baltimore Avenue, I didn't realize that there was a bus coming off of Takoma that forced me down the hill. That being said, in that area, and again, I'm on Eastern, on the DC side, very close to where there's a detour at Carroll Avenue. Sometimes I don't see what appears to be good coordination between the flags on opposite ends of the detour, because the traffic in opposite directions tend to converge at a point where it could potentially cause a collision. So I just want to request that some coordination is ensured so that a collision does not happen, because to have to back all the way down a hill on a narrow street because there's a bus coming at you in the opposite direction, I don't have a lot of confidence about trying to do that.
Yes, ma'am.
When the winter time comes and the roads are not good.
You should have been there the day the two buses met with each other. Either one would back up.
Yeah.
We had to eliminate a flagger because there was bad communication on that side. We upgraded the radios, which helped with the matter too, because we were also getting some good information from Pete Kovar, the councilman in that area, who was watching it daily and giving me phone calls and feedback. So sometimes it is a work in progress. We have we have people that we employ to do our flagging. They don't always do it right. Majority of the time they do, but we constantly have to stay on top of them. I've been in the situation where I've been coming up the street the wrong way and someone's coming the other way because a flagman made a bad choice.
It's also helpful if they're just attentive instead of standing there.
No, I had one today. I had one today over at the college, and I called him aside and I said, "We're not paying you to be on the cell phone. You can be on the cell phone in line. Or you can be over there watching your site."
Right, and I'm not trying to get anyone in trouble. I'm just saying if I'm approaching that detour, I would feel a lot better about going into the actual detour knowing that the flag person is paying attention and communicating with the flag person on the other end of the detour. And sometimes they do appear to not be attentive because they're...
Oh, I agree with you 100%.
Okay, thank you.
But thank you for the feedback.
Okay, I live at Eastern and Walnut. And my question to you is, what is the time period that we can call you? Because I know you're not going to answer the phone 24 hours.
That phone is on 24 hours a day. It sits 3 inches from my head on the nightstand right next to my pillow.
So if I call you at 3 a.m., you're going to answer it? For real?
I'm not, as Tammy knows, I'm not your typical contractor. I spent most of my life as a service manager. I used to be the service manager for all of Washington, D.C., for York International as a factory. I'm used to the White House calling me at 3 o'clock in the morning. So believe me, I do not hesitate to pick up the phone.
Okay, my next question is, I've been getting my information from the workers. I will go out and talk to them. And they was telling me that on a daily basis, you guys get at least 50 complaints. What was going on with those complaints? You certainly didn't have to have a community meeting to know that you were compromising the lifestyle. We have a pretty good neighborhood. You know, we have good neighbors. We don't have really major lifestyle issues, but this is a big one. And I know being there for some years, I didn't want to complain, be honest with you. My house is shaken. I've had rats. The flaggers, they stand on the corner. They eat their lunch. They drink their water. And they litter the neighborhood. We don't usually have that.
Okay.
I have to go to them and tell them, clean up behind your mess. So they pretty much have stopped hanging in front of my house, and they moved across the street, which is abandoned. Then when it's time to go to work, they go up the street to Carroll Avenue, and then they do the flagging. So is there some kind of way that they don't have to congregate in the neighborhood?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. The other thing is, the other day, they were moving a toilet, a Party John, on the Maryland side. But they placed the Party John so that people couldn't walk down on Walnut Avenue. Could something be done about that?
No, they shouldn't be blocking up Walnut with that. I would definitely check and see what that is.
That wasn't good. The traffic. People, they don't want to go up or down Eastern, so they come into the surrounding area, which causes a lot of traffic mess. They're in the alleys. They're along the streets. It's a big mess. Wednesday night was really a mess because the church, they have a program. The lot is full. So now you have all of this traffic. It's backed up, not on Eastern Avenue, but in the surrounding blocks.
Right. We have one thing we can't control. We've had this happen over on Colesville Road. We had a lot of this happening. When people come up and they see a construction sign, they see a flagger sign, they suddenly decide they're smarter, they're important, they're in a hurry. And they jump off and they run through side neighborhoods. We have had discussions with State Highway, with the municipalities. I don't know how to react to it. In other words, most of them won't post local traffic only signs because it implies another legality. We try to keep enough flow going through the area that people don't lose their patience, but there are some people that there's absolutely nothing we can do to keep them off the side streets. If they were to come up there and see an ambulance sitting in front of your house, would do the same thing. They would run off to the side streets and have them get lost because they don't even know where they're going. But because this type of work requires a lot of traffic control, us moving a lot of traffic around, there is always going to be some inconvenience. One of the things I appreciate, though, is the more you tell me, like mentioning the flaggers, we instituted a policy with the flaggers about a month ago that their supervision put a trash bag with every crew, and he picked it up at the end of the day. Because this gentleman that was getting the water bottles in his yard, he wasn't getting it because they were lazy. They were finishing their water bottles and sitting them up on top of the retaining wall.
Right, my retaining wall.
And the wind was blowing them.
That's true.
So what was happening is the bottles were moving around. They looked back, didn't see them, didn't realize they were gone. It was an innocent thing to do. Doesn't change the fact we don't dirty up your yard.
That's correct. You don't dirty up our neighborhood.
So the kind of things like some of the things you're telling me are going directly back to my 2 traffic managers. Here's what I heard last night. You need to tighten this up. So that's why I said I don't look at these sessions as anything other than good feedback.
If there are no other questions, I will take this opportunity to again thank the council member, the mayor, and staff of the city of Takoma Park for having us this evening. We really appreciate the conversation, the feedback. As Rich said, all of this information goes to inform better practices moving forward. So we look forward to working with everybody here in your neighborhoods, especially engaging Councilmember Todd's office in discussions on outreach and additional coordination. And again, I want to just reassure everybody in here tonight, you have tremendous partners in Darrell and Ian and city staff in terms of responsiveness and communication. We'll be here for a little while if there are any further questions. Thank you all very much.
I'll put the cards over here on the table.